Director James Washington had been overseeing America's national parks for 3 years, but he'd never been treated like a trespasser in his own protected wilderness. When Ranger Martinez questioned his right to be there, James realized it was time for an unscheduled performance review.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
The morning mist clung to the towering pine trees of Glacier National Park as Director James Washington adjusted his backpack and checked his GPS coordinates. At 45, he maintained the fitness level that had served him well during his early career as a field biologist, and these quarterly wilderness assessments were among his favorite responsibilities as National Parks Director. James had risen through the ranks over 15 years, starting as a seasonal interpreter and working his way up through various positions in the Park Service. His appointment as director had been both historic and well-deserved, but it came with challenges that extended far beyond budget meetings and congressional hearings. This morning's hike through the glacier backcountry served multiple purposes. He wanted to personally assess the trail conditions after recent storm damage, observe wildlife patterns during peak season, and most importantly, experience the parks as visitors did. Sometimes the best insights came from walking the same paths as the millions of Americans who visited national parks each year. The trail James had chosen was moderately challenging, winding through pristine wilderness that showcased Glacier's spectacular beauty. His permit for backcountry camping was properly obtained and documented, though he had deliberately avoided using his official title when requesting it. He wanted to experience the standard visitor process, not receive special treatment. 3 miles into his hike, James noticed another figure approaching from the opposite direction. Ranger Carlos Martinez, 28 years old and in his second season at Glacier, was conducting his morning patrol of the backcountry trails. Martinez took his responsibilities seriously, perhaps too seriously according to some of his colleagues. Martinez had joined the Park Service after completing his degree in recreation and tourism management. He was dedicated, hard-working, and committed to protecting the park's resources. However, his enthusiasm sometimes manifested as an overly rigid interpretation of park regulations, especially when dealing with visitors he perceived as not fitting his mental image of typical national park users. As the two men approached each other on the narrow trail, Martinez immediately began assessing the hiker. He noted the man's race, his high-quality but well-used gear, and his confident demeanor. Something about the situation struck Martinez as unusual, though he couldn't articulate exactly what. "Good morning," James said pleasantly as they met on the trail. "Beautiful day for a hike." Martinez nodded but didn't immediately respond with the same friendly tone. Instead, he studied James more carefully. "Morning. Are you camping in the back country?" "Yes, I have a permit for Bear Creek campsite," James replied, maintaining his cordial manner despite noticing the ranger's somewhat suspicious tone. "I'll need to see your permit and identification," Martinez said, his hand moving to his radio. "We've had issues with unauthorized camping in this area." James reached into his pack and produced his backcountry permit, which was properly filled out and valid. However, Martinez examined it with unusual scrutiny, holding it up to the light as if checking for forgery. "This permit was issued 2 days ago for a solo hiker," Martinez observed. "Are you hiking alone?" "Yes, as indicated on the permit," James answered patiently, though he was beginning to sense that this interaction was heading in an uncomfortable direction. Martinez continued his examination of the permit, then looked back at James. "What's your experience level with backcountry camping? These trails can be dangerous for inexperienced hikers." James raised an eyebrow slightly. The question was inappropriate and unnecessary, given that his permit had already been approved by park officials who had verified his experience level. "I've been hiking and camping in national parks for over 20 years. I'm quite familiar with wilderness safety protocols." "20 years?" Martinez's tone suggested disbelief. "What parks have you visited?" "Most of them," James replied simply. "Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Everglades, Denali, Zion, Rocky Mountain, Great Smoky Mountains. Should I continue?" Martinez frowned, clearly skeptical. "That's quite a list. Are you sure you're not exaggerating? A lot of people claim outdoor experience they don't actually have." James felt his patience beginning to wear thin. "Ranger Martinez," he said, reading the name tag, "I can assure you that my experience level is more than adequate for this hike. My permit is valid, and I'm following all park regulations." "How do you know my name?" Martinez asked suspiciously. "Have we met before?" "It's on your name tag," James pointed out calmly. Martinez looked down at his uniform, then back at James with continued suspicion. "Look, I'm just trying to ensure visitor safety. We've had several incidents recently with unprepared hikers, and frankly, you don't look like someone who spends a lot of time in the wilderness." The comment hung in the air between them. James understood exactly what Martinez meant, even if the young ranger might not have consciously realized the bias behind his words. A black man in expensive hiking gear apparently didn't fit Martinez's mental image of an experienced outdoorsman. "What exactly do you mean by that, Ranger Martinez?" James asked quietly. Martinez shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing he had crossed a line. "I just mean, well, we get a lot of urban visitors who underestimate the challenges of backcountry hiking, people who are more accustomed to city parks than wilderness environments." "I see," James said. "And you determined I'm an urban visitor based on what criteria exactly?" "I didn't say that," Martinez backtracked quickly. "I'm just doing my job, making sure everyone is prepared and safe." "Your job is to check permits and provide assistance when requested," James said, his voice still calm but carrying a note of authority that Martinez couldn't miss. "My permit is valid, my gear is appropriate, and my experience is extensive. Unless you have specific safety concerns about trail conditions, I believe we're finished here." Martinez bristled at what he perceived as a challenge to his authority. "Actually, I have additional questions. What's your planned route, and when do you intend to exit the backcountry?" James sighed internally. The ranger was clearly on a power trip, using his uniform and position to assert dominance over a visitor he had profiled as not belonging in the park. It was exactly the kind of behavior that James, in his role as director, had been working to address throughout the park service. "Ranger Martinez, my complete itinerary is documented in my permit application, which is on file with your dispatch office. If you have genuine safety concerns, you can verify my plans through proper channels." "I'm asking you directly," Martinez insisted. "Cooperation with park rangers is mandatory." James pulled out his cell phone and opened his camera app. "I'm going to document this interaction, if you don't mind, for my own records." Martinez immediately became more aggressive. "You can't record me without permission. Put the phone away." "Actually, Ranger Martinez, you're a public official performing your duties in a public place. I have every right to record this interaction, especially given the nature of your questioning." "The nature of my questioning?" Martinez's voice rose slightly. "I'm conducting a routine safety check." "No, you're not," James said firmly. "A routine safety check doesn't involve questioning a visitor's honesty about their experience level, making assumptions about their background, or suggesting they don't belong in the wilderness based on their appearance." Martinez's face flushed red. "I never said anything about your appearance." "You didn't have to say it explicitly," James replied. "Your questions and tone made your assumptions quite clear. Look, sir, I don't know what you're implying, but I treat all visitors the same way. If you have a problem with how I'm doing my job, you can file a complaint when you get back to the visitor center." James smiled slightly. That's an excellent suggestion, Ranger Martinez. I think I'll do exactly that. Martinez seemed to take this as a dismissal and started to turn away, but James continued speaking. But first, let me ask you something. How long have you been working for the National Park Service? 2 years, Martinez answered, still defensive. And in those 2 years, have you received training on cultural competency and bias awareness? Martinez looked confused. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, James said. The Park Service serves all Americans, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. When rangers make assumptions about visitors based on stereotypes, it goes against everything we stand for as an organization. We? Martinez caught the word choice. James reached into his wallet and pulled out his official identification. James Washington, Director, National Park Service, United States Department of the Interior. Martinez stared at the ID card, then looked up at James, then back at the card. The color drained completely from his face. You're the director? Martinez stammered. I am, James confirmed. And for the past 15 minutes, I've been experiencing firsthand the kind of discriminatory treatment that some of our visitors face in our parks. Martinez looked like he might be sick. Sir, I didn't know. I was just... You were just doing your job, James finished. Except your job isn't to profile visitors or make assumptions about who belongs in our parks. Your job is to protect resources and ensure visitor safety, not to interrogate people because they don't fit your preconceived notions. Director Washington, I sincerely apologize, Martinez said, his voice shaking. I didn't mean to. I never intended. Ranger Martinez, let me ask you something, James said. If I had been a white hiker with the same gear and the same permit, would you have questioned my experience level? Would you have suggested I was lying about having visited multiple parks? Would you have implied that I didn't belong in the wilderness? Martinez opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The honest answer was obvious, and they both knew it. I want you to think very carefully about your answer, James continued, because this isn't just about one uncomfortable interaction on a trail. This is about whether the National Park Service truly serves all Americans equally. Martinez looked down at his boots. No, sir, I probably wouldn't have questioned a white hiker the same way. Probably? James raised an eyebrow. No, sir, I wouldn't have questioned a white hiker the same way. I was wrong. James nodded. Recognition is the first step toward change, Ranger Martinez. The question now is what we do with this learning opportunity. Are you going to fire me? Martinez asked quietly. James considered the question. That depends on what happens next. This interaction could be the moment you become a better ranger and a better person, or it could be the moment your career with the Park Service ends. The choice is yours. Martinez looked up, hope and fear mixing in his expression. What do you mean? I mean you have an opportunity to learn from this experience and help ensure it doesn't happen to other visitors. The Park Service needs rangers who understand that our parks belong to everyone, not just people who fit certain stereotypes. I want to learn, Martinez said earnestly. I want to do better. James studied the young ranger's face, looking for sincerity. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to complete additional training on cultural competency and bias awareness. You're going to work with community outreach programs that bring diverse groups to our parks, and you're going to help develop protocols to prevent other rangers from making the same mistakes you made today. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Furthermore, James continued, you're going to personally apologize to every visitor you've treated inappropriately, if we can identify them. And you're going to write a detailed report about today's incident that will be used for training purposes. Martinez nodded vigorously. Whatever you need me to do, Director Washington. James softened his tone slightly. Ranger Martinez, I don't want to end your career. The Park Service needs dedicated people who care about protecting our natural resources, but we also need people who understand that these parks belong to all Americans, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. I understand, sir, and I promise you, this will never happen again. See that it doesn't, James said, because next time the person you profile might not be as understanding as I am, and they might not have the position to turn this into a learning experience instead of a termination. Martinez extended his hand. Thank you for giving me a second chance, Director Washington. I won't let you down. James shook the offered hand. Make sure you don't. The parks deserve better, and so do our visitors. As James continued his hike deeper into the wilderness, Martinez stood on the trail for several minutes, processing what had just happened. The director of the National Park Service had just given him a master class in leadership, accountability, and second chances. 3 months later, Ranger Carlos Martinez graduated from an intensive cultural competency program and became one of Glacier National Park's most effective community outreach coordinators. His story became part of mandatory training for all new Park Service employees, demonstrating how bias can affect visitor experiences and how proper intervention can transform careers. Director James Washington completed his backcountry assessment and continued his quarterly field visits to parks across the country. The encounter with Martinez reinforced his commitment to ensuring that America's national parks truly served as places where all citizens could connect with nature and experience the wonder of the wilderness. Because in America's national parks, everyone belongs, regardless of race, background, or the assumptions others might make about who has the right to enjoy the majesty of the natural world.